Good evening, and welcome once again to, well, the Shadow Gallery. That's what we'll call it tonight because this is really a Shadow Gallery vlog. Welcome, I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly. And the reason tonight is a Shadow Gallery chapter edition, whatever you'd like to call it, is that tonight we will be doing a year-end wrap-up of what I think are essentially the best of this year's comics and genre-based multimedia. Um, so, I mean, we're going to be talking a lot about comics. So I know that I haven't done that in a really long time. But I promised that we would have a year-end wrap-up, so here we go. So, for those of you who are new, you're probably going to see by the length that this will probably be a lengthy video. I'll try to keep it somewhat brief, just because it's just sometimes better that way. But anyway, so this is the best of, in some cases, not worst, but I'll go over the categories that we're going to be discussing tonight. First of all, of course, we're going to be discussing best continuing comic book series. We're going to be discussing best writer, best artist, best single issue, best miniseries, best new series, biggest surprise, biggest letdown, best character, and these are all comic related. And then we're also going to go into best comic book film, best genre film, and best genre television series. So, if you're sitting comfortably, then I'll begin. So we are going to start with what I think are the best. We'll start with the easy stuff. We're going to get the easy stuff out of the way. There's really only one entry into this category, and that is, and this category is best non-comic book film. And that, of course, has to be Pacific Rim. I know that they made comic book. I think they made comic books out of Pacific Rim since the film has come out. But before this was ever a comic book, it is not the greatest film in the world. It's certainly not an amazing, brilliant film, but it is a pretty wonderful film. There's a great, for those of you who watch the Honest Trailer segments on YouTube, there is a really funny one for Pacific Rim where they call it, it's either the stupidest, it's either the dumbest, most awesome film ever made or the most awesome, stupid film ever made. And there's some truth to that because, again, it's not incredibly smart. It relies pretty heavily on a lot of tropes of this kind of film. I mean, because it really, obviously it's more character. It's intended to be equally character-based and equally big action between the Jaegers and the kaiju. But really, when it comes down to it, when you watch it, it's really all about the Jaegers versus the kaiju. That's where the fun is. And you have these great, character names. I mean, like Stacker Pentecost. I mean, that is a fucking awesome name. And Hannibal Chow, and and the people that play. I mean, Ron Perlman, and Idris Elba, and even Charlie Day. I admired Bern Gorham, who is I think is a terrific character actor. And it's it's the lead, Max Martini, who's an actor that I've liked for a really long time. I've always longed to see him in more stuff, And they're talking about if they make Pacific Rim sequels, they might be about Max Martini's and his family's past when the Jaegers first came out, because that would actually be a prequel that I would like to explore. But anyway, hands down, it's a really fun film, and it's beautifully crafted from a cinematic standpoint. Everything looks fantastic. It's very light and dark, bright. It's very bright, and it's very almost noirish in some moments. But more than anything, it's just a lot of fun. And great comic books don't always have to be dark and and thought provoking. They can be really fun and smart. And in this case, more fun than smart, but it's the only thing that really kind of reaches that level. So, best miniseries. So we'll go to the comics now, and we're gonna kind of go back and forth as I go along. Best miniseries. To me, for my money, there were two, and one of them was the whole crew kind of getting back together: Brian Bendis, David Mack, Bill Sienkiewicz, Klaus Janson, doing Daredevil: End of Days. It was a really solid and just really well done, kind of alternate universe comic series that gave, because obviously, Mark Waid's Daredevil is so not that. It's so not anything like End of Days. And, it was nice to briefly revisit that kind of darker Daredevil book. But it was nice to come back, kind of chronicling the death of Daredevil and this mystery of Mapone, whatever that ends up being. As of course you find out throughout the course of the comic, the lives, the deaths, how Matt has touched so many lives, whether they be good or evil. The fact is that they were all made, either better human beings or worse human beings because of Matt Murdock. And I just love the thought of like a 70-year-old Punisher just going on a tear throughout New York. So it's just it's good. It was very well done, I think. And seeing art by people like Janson and Sienkiewicz is always it's always a good time. But for my money, the best miniseries to come out this year was The Black Beetle: No Way Out by Francesco Francavilla. I mean, it's insanely fun. It's really well written. It's beautifully drawn, as always with everything Francavilla. And it's just, it really just stood out as this amazing, marvelous, great pulp entertainment. So hats off to Francavilla for really creating a new character as opposed to kind of what we've been seeing from Dynamite, which is the recycling of these old characters that have existed for, decades, and really bringing something new to the table. Even, obviously, it's playing off of those same tropes that helped to create those other characters. So, good stuff by Francavilla. Biggest letdown. There are three. And it's not so much that they're bad, but it's just that they lost me. Either very quickly or gradually. One of them is Gail Simone's The Movement. It's interesting, but I'm not, it's like, from the first issue on, I'm like, okay, well, this has potential to be a really interesting story. And I just kind of kept losing interest with each additional book that came out. I mean, it's a very Gail Simone series, and bringing a character like creating a character like Vengeance Moth, and having her be disabled. It's it is definitely kind of a signature book for her, but not enough of her comes through, which is why I'm so glad that the Kickstarted Leaving Megalopolis exists. And for those of you who are out there who did get it, good for you. For those of you who didn't get it, bad move, because Leaving Megalopolis is fucking fantastic. I mean, Simone and Jim Calafiore Calafiore, excuse me, reteaming, the Secret Six team, and bringing something really hardcore, wicked, funny, and just kind of sick and disturbing at the same time. It's really wonderful stuff. And for those of you who didn't know, I'm sure that you did notice that if you do have Leaving Megalopolis, it does, on the binding, it does have, at the bottom of the binding, it does have a little number 1. So they are planning on continuing that story. And for the life of me, I can't understand why a comic book company wouldn't have picked this up. Now, again, I forget a little bit about the story as far as just the creating of this book is concerned, if she shopped it around and just couldn't get it going, but it just seemed like such a no-brainer. I mean, it's Simone and Calafiore, and they did Secret Six, for God's sake. I mean, I can't imagine that Dynamite or Image or Top Cow or whatever wouldn't have picked a series like this up. But it happens. So, Vertigo, this could have easily been a Vertigo book. This, like as a Dark Horse, anybody really could have picked this up, and, it wouldn't have had to be crowdsourced. But it was, and good for the crowd, and good for me because I helped with it. So that was a nice feeling also. But anyway, moving along, number 2 on this list is, and this is very sad for me, is The Shadow Now. Now, this is more personal than it is from a point of view of it being a good or bad comic. Again, it's not terrible, but it's just not, it doesn't pull me in because, and this is, again, part of where the personal aspect of this comes in, is that I had my own very specific ideas about how the Shadow could come into this era. I mean, obviously this is something that Howard Chaykin, kind of, and that's another thing, is that a book like this has already existed when Howard Chaykin created The Shadow, Blood, and Judgment, which is probably the best Shadow comic book ever. And then Kyle Baker and Andy Helfer picked up and kind of continued along that same, bringing the Shadow into the 80s. It didn't last for very long, but it lasted long enough to leave a good impression. And it's especially disappointing because this is the same team, David Liss and Colton Worley, that brought us the great reboot of The Spider. Which was a fantastic series. I love The Spider. And I really love David Liss, and I love Colton Worley. I think that they're a great team, but this book just didn't hook me, and I wanted it to, and it just didn't. And then the kind of biggest letdown for me, because I had been reading more books since Matt had sent me Preludes and Nocturnes, which is Sandman Overtures. to have Neil Gaiman and J.H. Williams III on a book like this, again, seems like it's just, this will be fantastic. And I know that, one issue has come out. If there's more, someone please correct me. But the first issue just didn't grab me at all. There was nothing about it that seemed like this is a travel that I believe is worth taking. That this is a road that I really want to go down. So it just bummed me out that it just didn't work. That it kind of that for me it fell flat. Biggest surprise. Now, this is in terms of not just the content, but just the fact that it just really took me by, like, whoa, what the hell is this? The first one, and this is really, again, a big surprise, because to me it came out of nowhere, and I, am a huge fan of the writer involved, and to me it was like, wait, he's doing a new series, and this is Joshua Fialkov and Joe Infernari's The Bunker. This kind of, I guess, non-comedic take on a kind of Back to the Future-esque concept is something that is, I mean, I know that's kind of how people sum it up, but it's so great. And believe me, I was going through Twitter one day, and all of a sudden I saw Fialkov post a tweet about something called whatisthebunker.com, and saying that issue 1 was up. I'm like, what? And then I went to the website, and then I went immediately to Comixology to buy the first issue, and since then it's just been blowing me away. It's one of those wonderful, little comics, and I mean, huge props to the two of them for for right now it's just a webcomic, but it is going to go to print, which to me is fascinating. That someone decided to, saw the genius of what Fialkov and Infernari were doing, and said, you know what, let's buy this and let's put it out on the shelves, because it's one of the best web series out there. So let's put it out and have people buy it in the brick and mortar shops. So again, huge congratulations to them on that. But really, the biggest surprise of the year to me was Nick Spencer and Steve Lieber's Superior Foes of Spider-Man. I never for a second thought that this would be a book that would somehow take off, but it is glorious. This is an amazing book. It's really, it's so good. It's so fun. It's so funny. Lieber does some amazing artwork here, and Nick Spencer just writes the living hell out of this book. I mean, there are some points where it does get kind of personal, and it gets a little dark, but for the most part, I mean, just the absurdity of it, and just this idea of this kind of workaday supervillain, and this group of supervillains, that they all that they're all just huge fuck-ups, despite how badly they don't want to be that. So to me, again, huge fun, brilliant comic, just an amazing work to me. Going back to the multimedia, I'm going to kind of get the rest of that out of the way, so that I can get on to the comics. Now, we're going to start with Best of Genre Television. Now, I'm sure all of you know what I mean by genre television. This is something that is, it's more of a fantastical element to it, or it's adapted from a comic book or a comic book character. As you well know, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. will not be making an appearance on this list, if you've seen my previous vlog about that show. because it's not very good. But of the 3 shows that are out there, and this is kind of how I rank them, is number 3, I would say, is The Walking Dead. It's a great show. This first, this first half of season 4 has really helped to kind of propel a different kind of threat in the form of, this kind of flu-like virus. And since, again, we know that, anybody who dies is going to become a zombie almost instantaneously unless they're dealt with, by head or by fire. Thank you, Carol. Then, sorry if I spoiled anything for anybody who's missed, but you have tomorrow and the next day to watch AMC and to catch up. So, and to have the reappearance of the governor, and have that resemble what this version of the governor would be like in that, in kind of that final battle between the 2 factions, between his people and the prison. And it was nice to have those kind of the kind of governor-centric episodes, to see kind of where, how he, seems to kind of not be what he is, and then, again, return to who he was. Because, you can't have a show like this and then have the kind of the main human villain turn into kind of a morally challenged kind of good guy, which is where it seemed to be heading at the end of his first return episode. But once it got into that second episode, it's like, okay, yeah, he's an evil motherfucker again, and this is exactly what he should be. Because as good as I thought that first episode was, I was not in love with the idea of him not being evil. So, number 2 is Arrow. I can go on and on. You can go and watch the vlog about me talking about Arrow. I did not love the first season. I am loving the second season. I think it's great. I think it's showing a lot of new potential. But number 1, above all of them, as far as genre television is concerned, is Game of Thrones. It's a series that, to me, just keeps getting better. As much as I love Season 2, I really loved Season 3. We could talk about this ad nauseum. It would be kind of... it would just be a little bit too... There's too much to say, because so much happens. I mean, obviously, the main focal point, the really kind of, reach in and pull out your heart episode, of course, is The Rains of Castamere, which features the Red Wedding, which, fans of the books, which I'm not, just because I just haven't read them, we're kind of dreading to see, because we, those of you who watch the show and or have read the books know how that turns out. And it's very, very, very disturbing and very kind of like, oh my fucking God, what did I just see? So Game of Thrones, again, keeps getting better. I know that Neil Marshall, the great filmmaker Neil Marshall, is coming back to direct another episode of this upcoming season. I think it might even be the finale, because he did I think the penultimate episode of season 2, Blackwater, which to me is kind of like my favorite episode of the show so far. But anyway, just an absolutely amazing show. I chose not to include Doctor Who in this particular list because basically I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it through 2013's season in time to watch this. If I could, I mean, I guess if I really wanted to go back, hey, it's my show, it's my rules, then I would put that uh, honestly just below Arrow, because this particular season of Doctor Who was, in comparison, was a little uneven. It had some brilliant moments, some great episodes, Asylum of the Daleks, and of course, Angels Take Manhattan. But like, the Time of the Doctor was a little bit okay. Um, Day of the Doctor, of course, was brilliant. It's an amazing episode. Probably my favorite episode of all of Doctor Who that I've seen thus far. And then, of course, you could watch my review of The Time of the Doctor, which is the end of the 11th Doctor. So I'd put that above The Walking Dead, but honestly below Arrow. Because Arrow just keeps me coming back. And not to say that Doctor Who doesn't, but Arrow just has, it seems like it has more to offer right now. Right now. That might change. But anyway, moving on, best genre film. To me, these are non-comic book films that are in that genre. I already talked about Pacific Rim, so I'm going to skip that. I'm going to talk about what I think were the best two genre films that came out this year. Coming in at a pretty close second is a film that I actually just watched again today for like the 5th time, and that is Edgar Wright's amazing The World's End. Now, The World's End might not be as funny or as inventive. It may not be as funny as Hot Fuzz or Shaun of the Dead. It might not be as visually inventive as Scott Pilgrim, but it is. It's by far the best film of the Three Flavors Cornetto Blood and Ice Cream trilogy, whatever you want to call it, because, and I shouldn't say necessarily by far, because all the other films are great. I mean, Edgar Wright has yet to do anything bad, which is why I'm so looking forward to him doing Ant-Man with Paul Rudd. But it just, first of all, Simon Pegg gives his best performance to date in anything. And so does Nick Frost. And just, I mean, that, quintet of actors, having, Eddie Marsan and Paddy Considine and, Martin Freeman, and together with Nick and Simon, is just like, it's just this kind of wonderful, this really wonderful ensemble that they've gathered for this story, that is ultimately about one man's addiction to his past. This is something that I personally relate to quite a bit. And yes, it is, he does obviously struggle with, the character of Gary King, played by Pegg, really does obviously struggle with alcohol and drugs, but it's more of an addiction to a time that has long passed him by, and it's just it's an incredible. I think this is maybe the most personal of Wright's films so far. It's certainly the most emotional. It's the first one to really kind of bring tears to my eyes, because the things that might happen in some of the other films, like particularly Shaun of the Dead, it was some very dark stuff that happens, but for example, with Sean's mom, that's pretty hard to watch, and it does get kind of emotional at that point. But then it ramps up the kind of the action, the horror, and the comedy again. So it doesn't end on a note that is terribly bleak, which is right for that film. Neither is this, really. But like I said, this film just has more to offer from a thematic standpoint, from a cinematic standpoint. Edgar Wright just keeps getting better as a director, and just creating these incredibly clever action sequences. And it's a great film, and I totally am in love with it, and I wish that people made more films like this. But number one for me, the best genre film of the year, and you can argue the merits of whether or not this is actually a genre film, but I do believe that it is, and that is Gravity. Um, wow. It's my favorite film of the year thus far. I mean, to take a simple survival story of two people and to put it in literally the most hostile environment that humankind has ever visited, really. And I mean, it's, as if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, the first kind of scroll that, state in space life is impossible. And this film shows just how impossible it can get. Sandra Bullock has never been better. I've never been a huge fan of her. So to see her in this type of role was really revelatory for me. Because this isn't kind of her standard shtick. It's not a rom-com. It's not, she's, not in some kind of weird, sidekick action film role. She really holds her own, especially with a seasoned actor like Clooney. And Alfonso Cuarón, man, he fucking rules. I mean, there were so many films that I saw this year where it's like, I kept, and especially after Children of Men, I just kept thinking, when the hell is this guy going to come out with a new film? And here it is, and it is glorious. And it is the first film that I have ever seen in 3D on purpose. But it's also the first film that I've seen in 3D where the 3D, that third dimension, actually does add to the storytelling. And that's a really astonishing feat. Now, Avatar, while looking beautiful and having these wonderful, gorgeous CG rendered environments, doesn't the 3D doesn't do anything for that. It's just kind of meh. But this film, I mean, you really get the sense that you're there. It's the most immersive experience that I think I've ever had while watching a film. I felt like I was there. And it's going to be a really weird time when this comes out on Blu-ray because I don't have it. Well, okay. Well, I mean, the PS3 is 3D capable, but I don't have a 3D capable TV. So to not see this in 3D, it will be a really odd experience. And I'll be interested to see how that ends up working out. Because I don't plan on getting a 3D TV anytime soon, because I do think that 3D is still very fad-ish. And that 99.9% of the 3D films that are released, or the films that are released in 3D, are shitty post-conversions, or, standard post-conversions, which look okay, but, again, they're just tacking it on to make more money. They're just, they put it into 3D so they could garner more ticket sales and garner more money for charging the extra amount to get it in 3D. So, Gravity, what an amazing film. Again, there's one of the things I also admire about it is that there's no pretense about it. There's, nobody's saying, well, this is just, kind of, some kind of, allegorical tale about the human condition or anything like that. It is just about a survival story in space. Let it just be that. That it's not necessarily all about the triumph of the human spirit over nature, what have you. It is just a grand and, beautifully short survival film. And of course, it has all of the trademark Cuarón long takes, and these huge sweeping camera movements where you can never ever tell where the cut is. I mean, I remember sitting there and not kind of mentally counting, but just kind of being aware that, okay, I know that that a cut hasn't happened yet, that a different camera angle has not been shown yet. It is not cut to anything else yet. And that, probably about 15-20 minutes of the film is maybe when you get your first actual cut, where it cuts to a different, we know, okay, we're looking at something completely different now that has cut. So that's just, it's the genius of Cuarón as a director, and it's a testament to Clooney and Bullock as performers. So just amazing, and of course to anybody who worked on the special effects for that film, because it looks amazing and the 3D is unbelievable. So moving on to best comic book movie. This is going to surprise you, guarantee you. Okay, so number 3 is the Wolverine. You can go back to my best of Marvel films to get more thoughts on the Wolverine, and you can also go there for my second favorite comic book movie of the year, which was Thor: The Dark World. You can get all my thoughts on that vlog, so I'm not going to waste your time here. But the best comic book movie that came out this year is Blue is the Warmest Color. Wow. If you haven't seen it, you're missing what I easily consider to be the best romance film since, and this is going to sound weird, but since Brokeback Mountain. I don't compare the two. I don't compare one film to the other because of their focus on same-sex relationships, but because I haven't seen a film that a romance film that has more deeply affected me since Brokeback Mountain. Blue is the Warmest Color, of course, based on French graphic novel artist, creator Julie Moreau. There's been a lot of talk about the film. We're going to leave that all behind. It's incredibly well directed, despite how the actresses might have felt about Abdelatif Kechiche, however you pronounce his name. But Adele Exarchopoulos it's the most revelatory first performance that I've seen probably since I would say Natalie Portman in The Professional. There aren't a lot of films that can bring a new actress to the scene like this and just have it be that amazing, where the performer is just that good. Okay, I take that back. Okay, there's been less time between Exarchopoulos in this film and Edward Norton in Primal Fear. But her and Léa Seydoux, they're so perfect for their roles. This is the kind of film that should be sweeping all sorts of awards, and hopefully it will when it comes to Oscar and Golden Globe time, best foreign film. I can't really imagine anybody beating Exarchopoulos, but I know that probably someone will, so that's just the way that it goes. But she already shared the Palme d'Or with Seydoux and Kechiche, at cons. So I guess that might be enough for now. But I would just love to see much more praise heaped on her because it's a brilliant film. Absolutely amazing. Probably my second favorite film of the year. Anyway, back to comic books, the actual printed kind. We're going to start out with Best New Series. Some of these have only had a couple of issues, but they've made such a huge impact on me personally that you just can't ignore it. At least I can't, anyway. First one, so it starts with the one that is kind of, that quote unquote is lowest on the list, but just in the merits of it's only had 2 issues so far, and that is Ed Brubaker and Brian Epting's Velvet. What a really awesome series so far. I mean, it takes, kind of the cool of, kind of the late 60s, early 70s Bond era and gives it to a woman. Why not? I mean, why can't, I remember Brubaker kind of pitching it as, if, let's say that the focus of the Bond films was on Moneypenny. That has a lot more credence to it with Skyfall, and how it kind of rebooted the character of Moneypenny, but it's just with Epting on art and with Brubaker on crafting this really clever, extremely involving, extremely exciting spy story. It's just amazing stuff. Great, only 2 issues in, and I'm totally hooked. I want more. I want more of this than I want more Fatale at this point in time. Not that Fatale is bad, but this to me is a little bit more exciting right now. Next on the list, I would say, is again The Bunker. It's just such a great series, and I can't wait for it to hit the shelves so that people can actually go out and physically touch it, and for it to hit the brick and mortar stores, because I think it's just going to be really, I think this is going to be an even bigger series at that point in time, and that will open a lot more doors as far as to what they want to do with it. I'm still really tremendously looking forward to Fialkov's Dynamite series, The Devilers, which I thought was going to come out this year, but maybe it's going to be next year. I'll have to tweet him and ask him about that. Anyway, moving on, next is Gail Simone's Red Sonja. This is a series that took my breath away from the first issue. And it is not let up. It has just been sheer awesome from beginning to end. And this is the Gail Simone that I've been missing. It's, incredibly powerful, emotional, kind of, it's sometimes a little sick and twisted storytelling, with a great, one of the great female leads of any comic book, and her kind of the female generals that or eventually become generals, I should say, in her army. A fascinating first arc for this series, and it's nice to have a really smart female writer writing a really awesome female character, because it's something that we don't get that often. And there's a lot of that in this list that we're going to be going over. But with some of these guys, that's okay, because they, as long as strong women continue to be written, then maybe that will let people know that, hey, strong female characters are actually really cool. And they're good for business. So maybe that means that we'll see more television shows, comic book movies, genre films that have really strong female leads. Because it's a great thing to have strong female leads. Because it's going to help change the conversation. Because this year we've heard a lot of bullshit, and I'm not saying that it's bullshit in the sense that it's wrong or incorrect or that it's a lie, but we keep hearing all of this horrible shit about, specifically about male comic book creators and how they have a past, and some indeed a present, of harassing female creators. And that to me is, it's just reprehensible, especially, the one that kind of hit me the most, and that really upset me, was the stories about Brian Wood, because he's kind of made his bones in recent years by making strongly female-led books. From the all-female X-Men book that he's doing, to even what he did on Ultimate Comics X-Men, and some of the other projects that he's been involved in. Does he do Mara? I don't know, and I don't really care because I didn't read that book. Didn't really do much for me. But anyway, I don't think he does. But anyway, it's like I said, it's really no matter, because when I heard that, I kind of stopped reading his stuff. That he has a documented past of doing this shit. So anyway, I'm getting way off topic here. So let's go back to the great comics. Number 3 on this list is Superior Foes of Spider-Man. I've already, exalted the virtues of that book, so I'm not going to go too much further on that. It's a great book. If you're not buying it, you're really, really stupid. And that's all that I have to say about it. Because you can separate this book very easily. I know that a lot of you have a lot of distaste for Superior Spider-Man, but those of you who are looking for a really great Spider-Man universe book that doesn't really involve Spider-Man, this is the book for you, and you should be buying it, and you should be reading it, and you should be recommending it to your friends and to your family. And I don't even know if the first trade has been earmarked for sale yet on Amazon, but as soon as it is, I'm pre-ordering the hell out of it. I'm probably going to get more than one copy, because this is like some of the other classics that I've talked about in the past that have been canceled. These are books this is a book I really want to see continue, and I'm hoping that it will. Number 2 is Greg Rucka and Michael Lark's Brilliant Lazarus. Just an amazing book from the get-go. It's so... The character of Forever Carlyle, again, is another brilliant, great, strong, fearsome, independent, wonderful female lead from another Greg Rucka book. This is a guy who, again, really has made his career on creating great female characters. And again, extolled a lot of virtues about that in past vlogs in regards to Queen and Country and Whiteout. His work on The Punisher with creating Rachel Cole Alves. I know that Nathan Edmondson is going to be doing a Punisher series. I think it's Nathan Edmondson anyway. It's going to be doing another Punisher series coming out next year. I really, really, really hope that Rachel Cole Alves is brought out. And actually, I kind of wish that she was the next Punisher. Or if they are going to work her in somewhere, since she's on the West Coast, maybe Warren Ellis's Moon Knight would be a pretty cool place to put her in. Because that's a book I'm really looking forward to. really looking forward to Warren Ellis's Moon Knight, because I love Moon Knight, as you know. But just, this society, the world that he's created, is a little too familiar for comfort, but it's also new and fresh enough to really explore. And just, from a character standpoint, there isn't much better out there. So huge kudos again to Rucka and Michael Lark. What an artist, man. What a great artist. His, not photorealistic art, but very realistic art is the perfect co-pilot for this series. And I'm hoping that as long as this series goes for, because I don't know if this is a finite series or if it's infinite, I'm just hoping that they keep going and going and going. So, best new series of the year. To me, there's almost no contest. Lazarus is not a distant second, but it's definitely second place to Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky's Sex Criminals. One of you, Fozzie Wazzie, did, and rightly so, pointed out that yes, my letter, the first time I've ever written to a comic book was to the folks at Sex Criminals, was to Matt and Chip, and my letter does appear in the third issue, in the back of the third issue of Sex Criminals. Yes, there aren't too many other comic readers, I guess, with the name James Donnelly, so that's my letter. And if you really want to experience truly great, truly hilarious, strongly emotional, really original storytelling, read Sex Criminals. Fuck Apple. Fuck them. Right in the ass. That's why I'm an Android guy. Anyway, so moving on to, let's start with Best Artist. This is going to go in no particular order for most of the rest of these, except for a few categories. But in no particular order, I'm just going to name them. Sean Phillips, doing some brilliant work on Fatale. Always a great artist, always someone to watch. Fiona Staples, Saga. The covers that she's done for Red Sonja, she astounds. She knows, she just knows when to make something really detailed and tight, and when it can be a little bit loose. And, it doesn't have to be, everything is so specifically defined as far as the look of it. But, more often than not, she does do very specific work, and it is glorious. Andrea Sorrentino, from obviously going from iVampire to what has been, obviously his dominant work this year on Green Arrow. Not a book that I'm reading a lot for the story, but more for the art, because I love Andrea Sorrentino. He's so awesome, and does just some incredibly magical work on this title, and really is the only reason that I'm reading it. Chris Samnee, his work on Daredevil just kind of explains itself. He's kind of this weird, love child of, people like Alex Toth and Will Eisner, but having, again, a style that is very singularly his own, and it's amazing. It's wonderful stuff. It's some of the most emotional content of any art that I've seen on the page. So it's just great stuff. Greg Capullo, of course, still really just killing it on Batman. I mean, the book has had some ups and downs, but Zero Year is not for everybody. But it's still drawn amazingly, so you can't deny that. Michael Lark, just talked about him and his work on Lazarus. So again, let's not go too much further into that. Francesco Francavilla, Black Beetle. His covers, his work on Afterlife with Archie, his work, all of the different covers that he does. And then if you follow him on Twitter or if you follow his blog, you see a lot of new artwork that he just does in a night. Whether it was his stuff for Breaking Bad, which I cannot believe for the life of me that he either didn't offer or that the people involved at Sony or Vince Gilligan or anybody like that didn't accept that he should have drawn his one his like single image drawings, paintings, whatever you want to call them, that he did for almost every episode should be collected as like trading cards that should have been put into like the big collector's set of the entire series. That's absolutely something that I think is almost essential to me, that that stuff would be in there. So, but it's not, and it's their loss. Marcos Martin, The Private Eye. I really should have mentioned that in Best New Series, and I'm sorry that I didn't, because it's just kind of hitting me now. It's like, why? Where the fuck? Why did I not mention that? Because The Private Eye, not only great idea from a storytelling standpoint, but to have essentially open source comic books. They don't care if you give them nothing to read it, and they don't care if you give them $1,000 to read a particular issue. I tend to spend anywhere between $4 and $5 on each new issue when it comes out. And obviously Brian K. Vaughan and Marcos Martin is a match made in heaven, and they deserve to be celebrated and to have a web comic that is, again, it's entirely open to whoever, and you can, and it's, it's kind of like going into a museum. It's like donations are accepted and they're encouraged, but you don't have to. So, just, I mean, a great idea, again, from just all standpoints of creativity, that they can do it and just, and they can have people just read it and kind of rip it off, or, like I said, you can give any amount of money that you want through your PayPal account. So, and just the story itself is totally fascinating. That was easily one of the best new series. So, sorry I forgot to mention that. And then, of course, I have to mention also in the Best Artist category, David Aja. His work on Hawkeye, it's setting almost a new standard for the way that comic book stories can be told. This is a guy that I've been a really big fan of ever since seeing his stuff on Mortal Iron Fist, and was so mad when someone else would step in for an issue or so, even if it was someone else great, like Michael Lark. But, because seeing his stuff, it's so fiercely original and so well crafted, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. But, wow, David Aja, great guy, great artist. Best writer, again, no particular order to this, so we'll just kind of go through who I have here. This was kind of a bummer, because this is kind of how low I would maybe rate him on this list. but Scott Snyder. This is a man who last year and the year before was basically saying this man is God. This man can do anything and everything, and he's doing it all brilliantly. But with his finishing up Swamp Thing and moving on to The Wake, which is an incredibly interesting series and a very well written one, but one that until the last issue of the first arc, I wasn't really on board with. Again, like I said, 0 Years, a little bit hit and miss, but he kind of makes up for what might be what people might consider to be the foibles of that series with doing The Death of the Family. So good. And in that same kind of league, I also have to mention Peter Tomasi. His work on Batman and has continually been pretty fucking stellar. I don't really read any of his other books. The only other book of his that I think I've read this year, and that's only because I got it as a Christmas gift at work, was Forever Evil Arkham War #1. That really didn't do a whole lot for me, but his work on Batman and is more than enough for me. Joshua Hale Fialkov, The Bunker, I, Vampire. His work on Ultimate Comics Ultimates is great. Alpha Big Time. It was a miniseries that I really, really enjoyed. Wasn't as good as the other two that I mentioned, but if I said that there was a third one, I would say Alpha Big Time. I really enjoyed the hell out of Alpha Big Time. But, again, you can go back to previous logs and see my love letters to Josh Fialkov. Gail Simone. Her work on Red Sonja kind of cancels out her work on the Movement, and her work on Batgirl has also been really strong this year. So not that it was ever particularly weak, but it's gotten better, and that's something that I've been waiting for. The most recent issue was kind of a little bit of a heartbreaker. I mean, it's so good and it's very emotional, and I just kind of and it really amped itself up under with her guiding hand. I know that obviously other writers have been involved in this past year, which has been I think Ray Fawkes did an issue. And I don't remember that issue at all, but I remember most of Simone's work from this title this year. So it's, she's really kind of getting into her own. Nick Spencer, obviously his work on Superior Foes of Spider-Man, and also his continuing pretty stellar but increasingly more confusing work on Morning Glories. And then, of course, there's also Bedlam, which is a really fascinating new book. I haven't gotten any of the more recent issues after the first arc ended, when it was kind of submitted for, kind of reapproval, because, a lot of these new comic books from these, quote-unquote newer creators or less famous creators don't tend to get the traction that they might want to, which is why, you have, Lazarus, but Lazarus sold extremely well. I have no idea what the sales figures look like for Bedlam, but I can guarantee you they weren't as good as most of the other kind of smaller series that garnered a lot of very positive press. But yeah, Spencer is just he's a great writer for the most part, and this year, like I said, I mean, Morning Glories has been kind of more dizzying than it ever has been in the past, Like, they're really trying to expand that world, and I don't know if that's necessarily the best idea. It's still a compelling read, as always, but it's kind of getting to a point where it's like, I'm not so sure where this is going. Well, I mean, you've never been sure where it's going, but I'm not so sure that it's going in a good direction. So, but we'll see. I'm hoping that he'll prove me wrong. Greg Rucka has work on, I know that Punisher, I don't know if his Punisher series ended back in 2012. I think it did. But, his work on Punisher Warzone, which I think was incredibly underrated, and of course his work on Lazarus. He's a great writer, always a great writer, always a great guy to latch on to. Ed Brubaker, Fatale, Velvet. I'm a little bit bummed that there's no Criminal this year, but obviously he's getting much more into his newer stuff. Did a nice send off for Cap, which I thought was good as far as his run on that was concerned. But his last couple of arcs that were not terribly good. For those of you who remember those reviews, was not a huge fan of his last couple of arcs of Captain America. In fact, the very last arc kind of sucked, but was kind of brought out of that by the finale issue, which was pretty great. Mark Waid, Daredevil. It's one of the best books on the shelves. Everybody knows it. So, not a huge fan of the Mark Waid Green Hornet series. And I missed, unfortunately, pretty much all of his Rocketeer Spirit, the Pulp Friction series. I'm trying to find the back issues so that I can read those, because I did read the first issue and I really liked it. And Mark Waid just seems to be kind of a perfect match for that character, particularly the character of the Rocketeer. Obviously, from his work on Carter of Doom, he just seems to be a natural with that character. So, fantastic stuff. Matt Fraction, Hawkeye, Sex Criminals. I'm not even really sure if there's a lot. I mean, I didn't read FF or Fantastic Four, which I think he was also writing for a little while. Because those series just didn't really interest me, maybe as much. Although some of the positive things that I've heard about his run on FF, particularly, has caused me to reevaluate, and maybe I should go back and take a look at some of those issues. And then, of course, just Hawkeye continuously killing it on every single issue. And Sex Criminals just blowing me out of the water. Great series. And Brian K. Vaughan. Again, this is, try not to make this in no particular order, but Saga, The Private Eye, oh, so good, we're getting to we're coming up on the last three categories here, and I'm going to start with best character, in which there were 8 of. 2 of them are not human, and 2 of them are men, which means the rest of them are women. And a very exciting year for women in comics. I'll start with the non-human characters. Uh, First being Lion Cat and Saga. I mean, I could say Slave Girl. I could say, the Will. I do, Gwendolyn. I do love those characters. Oswald Heist. I can't remember Marco's mom's name right now, but when it comes right down to it, there's a reason that there's a Lion Cat T-shirt, and it's because Lion Cat is just so awesome. Then the other one, of course, being Lucky, aka Pizza Dog, in Hawkeye. Such a great supporting character for that book, and will lead us to other places that we're going to discuss shortly. Most of these characters, with a few exceptions, are supporting characters, which is neat because sometimes the main characters there can only be as good as their supporting characters. And one of those supporting characters that I'm going to talk about right now is Franklin Foggy Nelson in Daredevil. It's very easy to use cancer as a plot device for a character, but Wade has done it with such grace and such dignity and such honesty that you really have to get on board with where Franklin Nelson is at this point. I've always loved Foggy. He's always been one of my favorite supporting characters, but this year especially has just been a tremendous, tremendous time for him. Mary Seward, aka Mary Queen of Blood of iVampire. I know not a lot of this series came out this year, but fuck me if when it wasn't out and when she was in it, she wasn't glorious. As much as I loved the characters of Tig and John Troughton and Andrew Bennett, even Kane, and Deborah Dancer, I mean, the character that just takes your breath away is always Mary Seward. And we'll get into a little bit more of that later as well. Boomerang from Superior Foes of Spider-Man. Oh, I mean, just what a great, conceptually, just what a great story for this character to set up. I mean, and all of the characters in this book are great, but just really to focus on Boomerang, and his dealings with his fellow villains, his dealings with Mach 5 or whatever he's called now, Abe Jenkins. And Abe being his parole officer, and just all of the things that pop up in his head and the things that he does and the things that he says. I mean, it's just, he's such a great kind of shitty supervillain, and and Superior Foes of Spider-Man really drives that home better than any comic book that I can think of that's ever told a story about the bad guys, with the exception, of course, of Secret Six. Secret Six, showed these kind of Z-list characters as, in some cases, Z-list. In some cases, there were more B or even A-list when it comes to characters like Bane. But, showed them as legitimate badasses and people to be feared. And to show a comic book based around villains that is kind of the complete opposite of Secret Six, with the exception of its sense of humor, is just kind of glorious. So, Boomerang being right at the top of those characters. Number 3 being Kate Bishop of Hawkeye and Young Avengers. She's just... I couldn't really kind of get behind her character at first when she first appeared in Young Avengers, when Alan Heinberg was writing the series. I liked that series a lot, but she was definitely not my favorite because she just seemed to kind of do everything naturally. To be kind of the pampered, kind of spoiled rich girl that she was, I wasn't able to connect to her. But once she got into the pages of Hawkeye and of Kieran Gillen's Young Avengers, all of a sudden it's like everything just kind of materialized. She's this, you know, young, smart, you know, somewhat independent, especially now, fiercely independent, sexy, you know, hilariously charming character that she's grown into, and it's fascinating. It's been fascinating to actually watch the development of her character over the years, and this is kind of like her year. This is, you know, it's the most awesome that I've ever seen her character. And there's so many different levels of sheer awesomeness that she brings to these two books, particularly, of course, Hawkeye, but just absolutely amazing stuff. Amazing character, and one that almost kind of has her own book in a way, but I think deserves, you know, kind of her own separate book. It'll never happen, but because I think, and mostly because I think just from a narrative standpoint, it would be weird to have two Hawkeye books on the shelves, considering that both her and Clint are called Hawkeye. So, but she's just great. I love her to bits. She is just one of those great characters. Number 2 is the character of Forever Carlyle from Lazarus. Everything that I love about a really great female character in the comic book world, you know, of the kind of post-apocalyptic futuristic world, this is a character you can so get behind, despite the fact that she is, you know, manufactured, and that she can kind of quote unquote live forever or keep coming back from the dead. Of course, you know, there are some elements of the Carlyle family that do, or the Moray family, that do really look to test that theory. But she's just, the growth of her character in just 5 issues has been tremendous, and has me fully committed to her journey as a character. And I would say number 1 for this year has to be the character of Alana from Saga. There's so much to love about her. There is an infinite amount of things to love about her that just, it defies description to just try and touch on just one bit, or, you know, this aspect of her character, that aspect of her character. Just everything about her is awesome. And I love her, and I wish that she existed in reality. And she probably does, but I'll never meet her. But I'm happily married, so that's okay. I have my own Alana. If I will be her Marco, she will be my Alana. But anyway, so, and let's move on to best continuing series. Again, this is not really in particular order. We're going to get more to a specific order shortly. But this is a rundown of pretty much every book that I've talked about so far, with one exception, is Thor, God of Thunder. I didn't name Jason Aaron in my best of writers because a little bit fuzzy on where he's been taking some of his other books. Wolverine and the X-Men, Amazing X-Men, I don't know if I necessarily trust where those books are going. Not the ride hasn't been really fun, but if there is a book of his that I totally latch onto, and I think Aaron got me started on this series. It was either Aaron or Ben. I honestly don't remember which one of you recommended this to me. It was Aaron. Yes, I'm sorry. It was Aaron, because Aaron, you won my little giveaway there. So thank you for recommending this series. It is becoming, again, obviously, as you can see here, one of my favorites. The God Bomb series, just, tremendously epic, drama, action, fun, humor. What's going on right now with the Malekith arc is tremendously entertaining, tremendously smart, tremendously well written. So big thumbs up to Thor: God of Thunder. Daredevil, everything that's happened this year, the kind of culmination of the threat surrounding Daredevil, and when it comes right down to it, who else could have been behind all of this? With the experimenting with the radiation, and with the character of Ikari. It's just like, it's literally like every nightmare of who Matt Murdock is being brought to life, and who else could have possibly known that but Bullseye. I mean, that's the long and short of it. I'm really glad that in examination that Wade did not choose to go with the Kingpin again, because Kingpin obviously very famously really upended Matt Murdock's life, and someone was trying to do that here, very desperately. And the machinations of everything from the beginning of this book's run, going back to issue 1, has been kind of manufactured by Bullseye. So just awesome stuff. Batman, and also on an equal standing, Batman and Robin. Both have been really so good this year. And again, like I said, I'm not going to waste more breath on this, but Zero Year has rubbed some people the wrong way. I think it's really good. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's as great as his other contribution this year, which of course is a Batman, a death of the family. But it's still an immensely readable comic, and I just love it to pieces. Lazarus, talked about that. Let's move on. Red Sonja, talked about that. Let's move on. Superior Foes of Spider-Man, we talked about that. Let's move on. Fatale, we talked about that. Let's move on. Well, we didn't really talk about Fatale, I guess, but the Seattle grunge arc, everything, kind of the solo adventures of Josephine before she was Josephine, the various incarnations of her throughout history, is so, that to me was so strong. It was so incredible to have these kind of one-offs. The arc, the Seattle arc, what I call it, the grunge arc, it's certainly not bad. It's really good. It's just not, I want more, and it's not quite there yet. But I'm really hoping that it coheres a little bit better as it moves forward from here. Sex Criminals, we've talked about that, sort of. Let's move on. Hawkeye, talked about that. Let's move on. Saga, talked about that. Let's move on. The Private Eye. We've talked about that. Let's move on. So those are, again, no particular order, but those are my picks for best continuing series. Now on to, I guess, what would be kind of the real Oscars of the event that we've all been waiting for, which is the best single issue. It's hard to examine what issue seems to stand out. I made a list of five major standout titles, five major standout single issues that challenged me, that hurt me, that made me giddy with joy, that just the power, the artistry, the technique in which it's crafted, all of these things merging together to make kind of this perfect single issue. Even if the rest of the comic wasn't that great, in which most of these cases you're going to find that that's not the case, but in some, I haven't really mentioned them, and one of them is only because it just doesn't exist anymore. But we'll start with what I would say is sadly the lowest on this list, but only because it is, I mean, but we're talking about, I've read hundreds of comics this year, so to pick out five is still, you know, that are above and beyond what I've read for the rest of the year, is still something of a feat in and of itself to get into this top five. So, but this one just kind of hurts because it is from a beloved series that is no longer with us, and that is naturally I, Vampire number 19, the finale issue. Not only having the virtue of quote-unquote wrapping up this, you know, the wrapping up the book, wrapping up the arc, having to say farewell to Mary Queen of Blood, her final moments in this world, or just even a projection of her into this world, a release back into the world. It was so incredible. And then to have Sorrentino come back and do the kind of quote-unquote the B story for this issue, which shows the, you know, which shows the journey that, or the beginning of the journey for Mary and Andrew together, and how wrong Andrew had it, and not because of who she was when he first knew her, but because of who she had become. And that to me was what was so remarkable about this issue, is that it left with this astonishing ending about the future that we have seen come to pass and how it got there. So for Fialkov to include essentially almost a character's origin in the very last issue of a book, a main character for the book, is pretty remarkable to do. It's a ballsy move, and it was incredibly well done. I mean, just a really magical issue, and I'm still sad every month that this book is gone, because I want it back so badly. But you know what? In a way, I'm happy, because this has allowed Josh to become a bigger, for his talent to have a wider audience, stepping over to Marvel, and working on Alpha Big Time, and working on Ultimate Ultimate Comics Ultimates, working on Hunger. I mean, that was a great miniseries too, and I'm sorry that I left that out. Sorry. I guess once you start to say these things out loud, more things become apparent. It's like, yeah, I probably should have included that in best miniseries, in the best miniseries category. So we'll go back to the beginning and say, yes, Hunger should have been in the best miniseries category. But anyway, the fact that it opened, that he was opened up to a new audience by being essentially totally fucked over by DC, has made me very happy for him as a creator, because it has opened a lot more doors for him. All these new avenues, these new these new books that he's working on and coming out with, and I can't wait for more. But unfortunately, no more a vampire. Number 4. This was a really tough call for this ranking of this particular issue. But when all is said and done, I think I kind of have to stick with this, and that is Hawkeye number 11, which pizza is my business. The sheer audacity of making a dog the main character of a particular comic book, and to show events that have already happened exclusively from a dog's point of view, it's mind-blowing, and I'm sure that it's been done before, but I can guarantee you that it's never been done this well. I mean, here is really where, David Aja firmly established himself as one of the great artists of this time that we're in right now. It's an amazing technical issue. It's an amazingly funny issue. It's an incredibly well-told story and well-crafted story. The amount of sheer imagination that went into the creation of this particular issue is pretty staggering, and is absolutely a highlight of this year. I mean, there's no denying that. This is one of those issues that people will talk about in probably years to come. So the fact that it's this low only indicates to me, and should to you, that there were other books that affected me even more strongly than this issue. And one of them is number 3. This is going to, I'm sure, surprise some people out there, shock, and maybe even piss off some of you, but my pick for number 3 issue of this year is Superior Spider-Man number 9. I never forgot. One of the things about this issue is that it stays with you just forever. It stayed with me from when I first read it back, I think in March when it came out, and I kept thinking about it over the weeks and months that have led to this day. And today, now technically being the 31st, it's New Year's Eve, everybody. So that's how long I've been kind of thinking about this issue and kind of loving it, because, not kind of loving it, but totally loving it. It's a totally devastating read to see kind of what is the defeat of Peter Parker, the exile of Peter Parker from his own mind. You can argue and talk amongst yourselves all you like about how you're hating Superior Spider-Man and how, well, this is just a way station between the next incarnation, the eventual return of Peter Parker. Yeah, that's probably going to happen. But for right now, we have Superior Spider-Man. I don't think this book was great enough to say, yes, this is one of the best series of this year. But this issue was so great, especially from having a really inauspicious start to this series with a couple of issues that I really fucking hated of this book, but said, you know what, I'm going to stay along for the ride. And I have stayed along for the ride. I've enjoyed every issue for the most part. Some are better than others, but this stands way high and tall above the rest. It is an absolutely ridiculously brilliant issue, and it is, like I said, an utterly devastating read. So from a technical and emotional standpoint, this book affected me just about more than any other book out there, except for one, and we'll get to that. Okay, let me just give you a runner-up on this Batman 13, the first issue of Death of the Family. I have a whole vlog dedicated to that. You can go back in time and you can read that, so I'm not going to talk about that. But number 2 is, I know you've heard a lot about this already, but is Sex Criminals number 1. I kept hearing from people who had read it, creators on Twitter that were able to read the first issue. Ed Brubaker kept talking about how amazing Sex Criminals was, and that it's one of the best first issues of any comic ever. Was the way that he really built it up, and people kept talking about it, and it's like, leave me alone. I can't wait for this to come out. And then it came out, and it was like, if there's a book that ever lived up to the hype that had surrounded its creation, it's Sex Criminals. And it is deserving of every single possible accolade that it could be given. And this issue is not exactly the perfect distillation of what the series is about, but it's a perfect issue in the sense of how the story is going to be told. By introducing us to these characters and then to give us that bang of an ending, it just astounded me. It made me feel very intensely. It made me laugh hysterically. The verbal and visual wizardry that Fraction and Zardi create for the backdrop of our two main characters in this book is something is a glorious thing to behold, really. And I can't stress enough how awesome of a book Sex Criminals is, and how amazing of a first issue this was. I mean, just incredible stuff. I mean, to treat sex with both the fun and the seriousness that it deserves, and to do it in a way, particularly in the first issue, from a female point of view, was something to really just behold, and just took my breath away. But the best single issue of this year goes to, more than anything else, Batman and Robin number 18. This issue, wow. I mean, there are no words for it, because there are no words in the book. It's just, the the book, without there being a single word in it, radiates this very persistent grief that, for those of us who have lost loved ones, it's an issue that is funny, because I was going through the IGN poll for, best comic books, whatever, and best single issue of the year, and this was not on there, and a lot of people said that this was a write-in vote for them, that this particular issue was a write-in vote for them, and it was for me too. Because, it was just such a superbly told story. Written by Tomasi with the art by Patrick Gleason. It's gorgeous, heartbreaking, and there's been no other book really quite like this in recent memory that I can think of. To really have the balls to do an all-silent issue of a comic, and to distill it to its very core of where everyone is emotionally at. All the characters, down to Titus. It's so heartbreaking to read and to look at, and it's one of the hardest comic books that I've ever had to read, and from a superhero standpoint, I should say. And again, this is the kind of book that should also be celebrated just as much as any of the other issues that are more popular or more technically superior, as you might want to call it. Pizza Is My Business seems to be the one issue that everybody kind of keeps going back to over and over this year as being like the best example of comic book writing and art. And that may be true from a critical eye, but from what this issue did to me personally, that's the key. That's what a book has to do to me in order for me to stay invested. Now, again, Pizza Is My Business. It's a great issue. It's a brilliant, fun, incredibly well-told story, but this is just really what great superhero comic books are all about. Is about taking a real event, not in the real world, but to take a real event, the death of a child, and to not fuck around with it, to show us what's going on. It's a masterpiece of comic storytelling, and it's the best issue of the year. So that's it. We're done. I promise. There's no more. I know. Hour and 43 minutes and 23 seconds. So I'm leaving now because I've got to go eat. But for those of you who are stopping by, thank you so much. For those of you who have made it all the way through it, I know it might take you more than one go to get to it, but thank you for doing so. And thank you to all the people who have come on board and subscribed since I've come back. Don't expect a lot of this. I want to do a year-end wrap-up because that's just a necessary part of who I am. Again, just thank you to all the YouTube people out there who are watching, listening. If you're at work or you're at home, and you're parsing this together in bits, great. Just thank you. Thank you all for your continued support. I'm hoping that you'll come out and visit a little bit more often now. But I want to thank you all, and again, just if you're new, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Donnelly92274. I'm on Facebook. On Tumblr, the Shadow Gallery Comics .tumblr. At tumblr.com or whatever the fuck it is. .tumblr.com. And of course, here on YouTube. So please subscribe if you like what you've seen. Don't forget to leave the comments, even if it's just to say Happy New Year. It indicates that you came by, you said hello, and you left. Doesn't matter if you watched the whole thing or not. Obviously, I would prefer that, but, I know this is a long video, so I'm leaving now. So again, thank you so much. My name is James Donnelly. You are now exiting the Shadow Gallery, and remember, for maybe the last time, to stay in the shadows.